Hey everybody, it's John from Humor and History, and this is 10 facts about Ulysses S. Grant. I actually think he's quite an interesting character in American history. I hope you will too. If you're British, I would love for you to learn about this guy. He's kind of neat. If you are American, hope you'll enjoy this. If you're from anywhere else, I hope you learn something new.
Number 10. Ulysses S. Grant was elected president at age 46, making him the youngest man elected up to that point.
Okay.
To this day, he still holds the title as fourth youngest man to ever serve as president.
I don't know that that's
he was
the
also
most
exceptionally
pertinent
young when compared
knowledge,
to
but
most of the other great general presidents, such as Andrew Jackson, Zachary Taylor, and Dwight Eisenhower, who were all over 60 when they took office.
So the United States does have I wouldn't say a habit. It's not the worst thing in the world, but we do tend to elect our presidents who were generals. In certain cases, almost a lot of them have run on their military career, saying this is, look at my military career. This is why I can run things. I got great leadership, that kind of deal. And not everybody was elected, but many have run for president.
Number 9. Grant was the last president to own a slave. When Grant was in his mid-30s and struggling to get by, his father-in-law gifted him a slave named William Jones. Grant owned Jones for only a few months before setting him free and never owned another slave. He became increasingly opposed to slavery over time, but wasn't so much as a young man. In one letter to a friend, he wrote, quote, "I was never an abolitionist, not even what could be called anti-slavery." Number 8.
True about Grant. Important to note that he freed the slave that was given to him, worked alongside the slave, and he could have sold him for about, I think somebody had said that the equivalent at that time, age, whatever, of the person that he owned, he could have gotten about $1,000 for him. Now Grant had failed so much that his father-in-law really kind of made him the butt of a lot of jokes, but didn't want his daughter, of course, to be destitute, so gave him a slave. And it turns out the guy worked right alongside of him, and Julia Dent, who he Grant married, her father, just people, in his circles ridiculed him and kind of laughed at him because he was working right alongside of a slave. But like a lot of people at that time period, their thoughts evolved on slavery. So, and a lot of it, some of it started with the abolition of slavery from Great Britain.
8. Grant was the first two-term president in over 30 years. The last president to serve out 2 full terms had been Andrew Jackson, who finished his second term in 1837. Grant began his first term in 1869, 32 years later. Abraham Lincoln was elected to a second term in 1864. However, he was assassinated only a month into it. Not only did Grant win 2 terms, but he did so with large electoral margins both times.
It's very true. George Washington started the term limitation. There was no rule. It was just merely George Washington did it. We will do it. You've got 4 years per term, and Washington ran twice and did not run again. And it happened to Jackson, and it also happened to Lincoln again. Yes, as I said, Lincoln didn't do his second term. Grant did both terms. He took a break, and then he flirted with the idea of running for a third term. And he kind of did one of those sort of like, I'm not going to run. But he was interested to see what people thought. And it turned out that he didn't sort of make the cut after 2 terms. It's not that they didn't like him. It's just that there were other people, I think, who were going to be on the Republican ticket. Because one, they never thought he was really serious, and he kind of thought at that point that he was a shoo-in. So it was a little bit of a disappointment for him. It's very interesting if you read his biography.
Number 7. Through his whole life, Grant was known for his good-hearted and compassionate nature. As a child, he would go on hunting trips with other boys, but refused to shoot anything. He also hated bullying and often defended smaller kids. Later, when he witnessed bullfighting in Mexico, he was so disgusted by the treatment of animals that he described the matadors as murderers. Even upon meeting the surrendering Confederate forces at Appomattox, he said he felt, quote, sad and depressed seeing his defeated foe. Number 6.
Yeah, he was an avid horseman. He loved his horses, treated them very well. As a matter of fact, many people describe him as one of the best horsemen there ever was. His compassion towards animals and towards people was very well known. Obviously, it evolved, but from a young age, it started with horses. But he was also a very matter-of-fact person, to the point that he was very it allowed him to be taken advantage of. There was a story about him when he was a kid selling his going to buy a horse for his birthday. He was allowed to get a one horse, and they were not well-to-do. But his dad said, "Look, you can offer him Y, but don't, and you can go as far as, I don't know, Y plus $5." He goes, "But try to get Y." And he goes there and talks to the guy. He says, "My dad says I'm allowed to offer you Y, but if you won't take it, I'm allowed to give you as much as Y plus, $10, whatever it was." And then the guy was like, "Okay, I want Y plus $10." And he gave him the money, and he got a nickname which was not great. It was like Slow Grant or something like that. And people thought he was an idiot.
Today, Grant's presidency is primarily remembered for the rampant corruption. Grant himself is almost never accused of being corrupt, but rather, historians point to his trusting nature, having allowed conniving politicians to get the best of him. Nevertheless, he's received praise for his willingness to defend the freedmen in the South and his effectiveness in doing so, such as overseeing the passage of the 14th Amendment and using military force to destroy the early Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, so Grant, Grant's presidency was fraught with corruption. It was all over the place. It was rampant. And it was people taking advantage of him. He himself was never accused of being, or as far as I know, was never accused of being corrupt. It's not his thing. It's not his style. It's not who he is. But that's what gets the press. Like Herbert Hoover, during the Great Depression, people thought bad president. No, that's the one thing that, sullied his name. But if you look at Grant, he tried to continue with the Reconstruction that Abraham Lincoln wanted to have done after the Civil War. So many people were upset in the South as well as the North that he was shot, because they knew Lincoln was one of the best bets to help them. He wanted charity for all, malice towards none, and Grant wanted that really too. But at the point after Lincoln was shot, then you get President Andrew Johnson, and he showed his true colors when he became president, because he was a Democrat, and he kind of wanted to do more punishing than anything. Stop the rights of people, and it wasn't wonderful. But then Grant came in there, and like the KKK was, becoming in full swing, and he put a stop to that. He did a lot of management, and a lot of it was through the military. But after he was in office, then they basically essentially kind of agreed to call Reconstruction done, and that was really the end of it. So the South, for a little while, though being in turmoil after, it was about 20 years or so after the war, not even, was under occupation, but they formally ended it, kind of after his presidency. And anyway, he did a lot of good stuff.
Number 5. Grant was actually born with the name Hiram Ulysses Grant.
Yeah.
Early in life, he dropped Hiram, largely because he hated being teased for having the initials HUG, or Hug. The S only became his middle initial because of a clerical error when he was applying for West Point Academy.
Yep.
Number 4.
If you don't know what West Point is, it's where people go to become officers. You can be appointed. And of course, the person who put Ulysses S. Grant in the roster, he said, "That's not my name." And they were like, "Tough, it's in the roster. We're keeping it."
4. Grant's rival in the Civil War, Robert E. Lee, is often renowned as one of the greatest military generals of the Civil War and sometimes in United States history. Grant didn't think as highly of him, saying he feared Confederate generals such as Joe Johnston much more than Lee, describing Lee as an overly conservative and cautious leader who benefited greatly from having a unified South behind him, rather than any special kind of genius. He also criticized his leadership style on a more personal level, calling him a headquarters general who was often inaccessible to his men. Now,
the bottom line with that is, okay, that's his assessment, but there's a myth. Well, I don't want to say myth. There's a thing that happened. It's called the Lost Cause. Basically, it was an agreement, after the war, many years after the war, basically saying the South fought for a just reason, and the North kind of said, "Okay, we'll call that's the narrative of the Civil War." And General Lee became sort of this almost godlike figure in the South, but the reality is Lee was just as much a flawed person as everybody else. He was very much a Napoleonic general. Grant, on the other hand, was very much a more futuristic general. I'm not saying he used lasers, but what I am saying is he was very much into open to new ideas. Grant is a man who failed so many times that it was almost impossible for him to fail more. Just before the Civil War broke out, he was selling firewood to keep his family alive. He would do what needed to be done. And so, when people talk about Lee and Grant, people think that Lee was the better of the two generals. You look at some of the, if you take away that lost cause mentality, Lee was a fantastic general. It's like comparing, I don't know, two great sports cars or something like that. I mean, the differences are there, but one might be better than the other.
3. Despite being America's second Republican president, Grant was initially opposed to the party. In 1856, he voted for Democrat James Buchanan over Republican John C. Fremont. He was worried the Republican position on slavery would lead to secession. Prior to the Civil War, Grant tended to vote Democrat, though he didn't vote down the party line, believing that a man's capability for any given office didn't depend on his political party.
Very true. Grant was very much like that.
Number 2. Grant is featured on the $50 bill.
I have no idea why.
The bill has been around since 1861, with early versions featuring either Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, or Henry Clay. Grant's portrait was first used in 1913 and has remained on the bill ever since.
Yep.
Number 1. For the final year and a half of Grant's presidency, no former presidents were alive. Franklin Pierce died during his first term, and then Millard Fillmore and Andrew Johnson during his second. Only 3 other presidents share this distinction with Grant: George Washington, who had no predecessors, John Adams, as Washington died during his term, and in more recent years, Richard Nixon.
So he's an interesting cat. By the end of his life, his son had started at this investment, I believe it was an investment firm, and his son's business partner lost all the money. They lent their name Grant to the, after the war, because he was really a global hero for what he had done. And anyway, they ended up losing their money. It was actually stolen. They were penniless. And Grant, up until I think 3 days before he died, wrote his memoirs. And one of the things that, if you ever get a chance to read his memoirs, I've read excerpts. I have not read them, but it's a very plain way of speaking, and it's very readable and easy to follow. He finished it, like, I think it was like 3 days before he died of throat cancer. So Ulysses S. Grant's a great guy. I think it's very interesting. Constantly failing and succeeding, but perseverance is right there. All right, everybody. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, and I'll talk to you later.